Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffat as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffat.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffat. I'm in Burrawang in New South Wales, as you all know, and today gives me great pleasure to welcome to the studio Ishan Galapathy, who is in Sydney, or in northwest Sydney, Castle Hill to be exact. So same time zone, which is great. And Ishan, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, David. This is not my usual podcast that I join in. And turning up to anything that says dental kind of worries me. So I hope you're not going to put me through a lot of pain.
Ishan, I was just about to introduce you as being not a dentist. You don't work with dentists. You and I met a month or two ago at New South Wales chapter of the Professional Speakers of Australia. You were looking at improving your speaking skills. And so you and I met there, and it was great to talk to you. But what excited me about you and your subject that you're talking on is that you talk on systems and processes, which is really, really important for all businesses. And I guess really, for all things in life. If we don't have systems, we just have chaos, really. Isn't that the case? And so I wanted to chat with you about, because you work at the big end of town with big companies that have big systems and a lot of employees and big processes and huge budgets and huge incomes. Now, a lot of people think that dentists have huge budgets and huge incomes, but sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes that's not the case because they waste a lot of money on not having their processes in place. And they don't understand that because dentistry is a high profit margin sort of business. And so the difference to a dentist between whether they're making 20% profit or 15% profit or 10% profit, it's still a lot higher than a lot of big businesses are making. And yet, as you are surely going to tell everybody on this podcast, small tweaks at the grassroots level can result in huge changes in profitability, can result in huge changes in efficiency, and also employee satisfaction rates as well. So over to you. Let's hear about your story. You've already told me off camera that you're from Sri Lanka and you arrived in Australia from Sri Lanka and were educated in Australia. And let's hear your story and how you've ended up where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, David. If you were having this conversation, I guess 30 years ago, you would find me in that liminal stage of transitioning from Sri Lanka, settling in as an engineering student at the University of New South Wales. So settled in the Coogee, the Eastern Beaches area of Sydney, and pretty much went through my uni life. And during then, I met my wife-to-be, who is also Sri Lankan. A lot of people say, oh, how wonderful and what a coincidence that you met a Sri Lankan person at uni. And I said, well, the chances were pretty high, considering I met her at the Sri Lankan Student Association at the university. So that's what brought me to Sydney and to Australia. And if we were having this conversation, I guess, 20 years ago, you'd find me again in a transitional point of having worked at the first business making aluminium windows and doors. So after being graduated, I was helping them to improve productivity. And this was the time when Sydney Olympics and the housing market was going through the roof, pardon the pun. And so this business had to improve how they did what they did, making aluminium windows and doors, so that they can keep up with the demand. So I was in a transition from being in that company for 7 years, and I was getting into FMCG. That's fast moving consumer goods. Predominantly, most of the things you can buy from a supermarket shelf is what is made up in that category of FMCG. I joined Arnott's Biscuits as a production manager, in layman's terms, for the Tim Tam line. So here I was, having worked with windows and doors, highly unionized, fairly manually manufacturing environment, highly automated food manufacturing, a line that was about 1 kilometer long. So it was important for me because no matter whether you're making windows and doors and whether you're making food, at the end of the day, you've got teams in your business and you've got people trying to add value, whether it is making windows or whether it is making a biscuit case or whether you're providing a service to a customer, like in a dentist practice. In manufacturing sense, which is a little bit difficult, a little bit different, and we'll come to dentist practices in a moment. Where the opportunities are is not in adding new equipment. Of course, there is an opportunity, but that comes at a huge cost. Where a lot of leakages occur is with the invested equipment, are we getting the most of it? And the answer is no. And hence the reason why people like I exist, where we can help companies to basically maximize the return of their assets. Moving on with my story, if you were having this conversation 10 years ago, you'd find me again at a transitional point of having moved on from Arnott to Kellogg's, looking after all of Asia Pacific with factories in 7 different time zones in Kellogg. And I was helping each factory to be productive, stay ahead of inflation, reduce the cost of manufacturing, and improve people engagement, the happiness factor. And I had an opportunity to get a redundancy and set up my own consulting practice. Because one thing, David, I found was having seen the best of the best around the world, and my Kellogg role provided that opportunity to go and see the best of the best around the world. No matter the size of the company, no matter the sector you are in, and no matter the country the businesses are in, one thing we do is we do not get the best of the best when it comes to our equipment and our teams. And the second thing is we make this overly complicated and complex, the concept of improving businesses, than it needs to be. So over the last 10 years, I've published some books to showcase how to simplify the world of continuous improvement. And I've been working with clients. Yes, some of them are well-known large companies. Some of them are large companies that you may not know of, but helping them to implement these systems and processes and to maximize their profitability.
Well, that's a long journey, Ishan, and with a lot of fork or a handful of fork in the road changes. For me, being older than you, the thought was finish school, go to university, get a trade, an educated trade, stay in that trade for the rest of your life. And so the fear of getting out of that trade and going out on your own and selling your knowledge, it was something that was quite foreign to me. But I like the way that you identified that there were things that you were seeing. And you also mentioned, and a really good point, and this applies to dentistry, a lot of dentists feel that if they buy more fancy equipment, if they learn more fancy processes, that's going to improve their business. But they don't know how to market those, and they don't know how to utilize them as well. And it's often with fancy equipment in dentistry, those famous 3 words, steep learning curve, which prevents them from actually capitalizing on what they've invested in. Now, that's one thing out of what you just said, but the other thing that you probably alluded to but didn't say was that one of the big investments that all businesses need to realize is that they need to invest in their people as well. And because their people are one of their biggest overheads, and if you can have those people on your side, then you'll get more productivity out of them as well. So tell us a few interesting tales where you've seen the case where a company has not looked at things evenly and they've gone in the wrong direction for one reason, without mentioning any company names. Have you seen that sort of situation?
Absolutely. There are many stories that I've captured in my latest book, Unlock, which is totally about how we take the people on the journey. One of the things, so I'll share a story on how we can tap into the people and what that looks like. But I'll also share a story on the equipment aspect. From a people point of view, Sam. So Sam was the best corn cooking operator in South Africa. I can mention the names because I've got clearance from these companies and it's already published in the book. So as you can guess, if you're cooking corn, it must be from Kellogg, because that's the starting process of cornflakes. When I started working at Kellogg, this is 2011, South Africa had a lot of opportunities in terms of growing that market and making a bigger, reaching out to sub-Saharan regions, and obviously growing the business. But the bottleneck was manufacturing, supply chain, as we call it. The manufacturing was the bottleneck because they had a lot of issues and they couldn't deliver enough even to meet the local demand, let alone trying to even think about growing the region sales. So as the regional operational excellence manager, that's the fancy title I got. My role was to work with the supply chain director to identify opportunities, provide the capability, provide the training, and be the coach and the mentor to basically unlock that capacity. We found very soon that the corn line was the most constrained, so we started working on that. And one of the ways that we do this, David, is by tapping into the people knowledge. It's not about, it's not about going and upgrading all the equipment, because that comes at a higher cost, but that's not the answer to all the problems. So we bring in these groups of people, and I've trained some of the team leaders on how to brainstorm on the issues that frustrate them. So one of the phrases I write on the board before the people come in is, what are the reasons you go home and kick the cat for? Right? The poor cat, takes the brunt of all your workday frustrations. So we just brainstorm, and there's a whole raft of issues that come up, and it takes a good facilitator to get real valuable issues, because you get the typical stuff of not enough communication and the facilities aren't good enough and the coffee is not good enough. Yeah, you get that kind of stuff. But once you start facilitating, you get to some gold nuggets. Now, Sam was one of the best operators. And Sam was also one of those operators that collectively as a leadership team, we knew wasn't going over and beyond. The conversation in the leadership team often was, why does Sam, leave the brains at the door? He just turns up in body and he does whatever he needs to do. But he's got so much knowledge, he's got so much ability to do more, but he wouldn't. So we were trying to basically find ways to engage Sam. And I didn't know who Sam was at this point when we were doing the brainstorming sessions. And Sam was in one of the sessions, and Gloria was the team leader who was doing the facilitation. And the session was over, and they all walked off, and I was just basically looking at the whiteboard of all the issues that had been raised, and I'm trying to basically find out common themes. And I heard Gloria rushing back in. Gloria is this beautiful, she's like a big sister, had different hairdos every week, as most South Africans do. She wore a beautiful smile, and she gave the warmest hugs, kind of makes all your problems go away. And she came almost running, and she was excited, or she was upset, or I couldn't tell at the beginning. And Ishan, and she came running to me and she grabbed my hand. And I said, "What's wrong, Gloria?" She said, "Sam spoke to me." Like, "Yeah, what's the problem?" She said, "Well, Sam doesn't usually start a conversation. He only just replies in fewer words as possible. But Sam had started a conversation this time, and Sam had told Gloria that for 17 years, no one had asked for his opinion. For 17 years, no one had asked for his opinion. So he's kept quiet. You see, most of the employees, when we start to see things, the opportunities, and we start to share them, because most employees turn up to work to do better, to do well, to help the company. But in organizations, we fail to have systems in place to capture those ideas. And yes, we can't fix all the issues. So we need to find a way of prioritizing and fixing some of those issues. And over time, because of this gap or because of this failure of systems to identify, prioritize, and improve, people get frustrated. And people go home and kick the cat. And people say, well, why do I bother? Because I've told them 5 times. And if they haven't done it, mustn't be important for them. So I'll just zip up. That's quite common. And that's how you end up with the disengaged employees. But as the case was with Sam, it also doesn't take much to re-engage people. It's purely through involvement. Now, it doesn't simply happen by just inviting and getting them involved. It just so happened to it just happened with Sam in that case. But in my experience, David, it's these fence sitters that we call disengaged employees. If you simply get them involved, to invite them to participate in improvement initiatives and activities, and if we respect their views and we look at ways to remove their frustrations, the points they go home and kick the cat, then productivity improves. And this is something that I've seen as a common thread all the way from making aluminium windows or making Tim Tam biscuits or making cornflakes in South Africa, with the common issue of identify frustration points from within your team, find the common cause, don't just fix the surface problem, find out what's causing that and fix it. And once we remove those frustrations, productivity just lifts, engagement factor just lifts, and ultimately profitability lifts. That's the people aspect. Let me give you a short story on the equipment part. In one of the companies I was working with, I did a small contract work. And in this company, the problem was it was owned by a private equity. So we know that private equity firms are extremely impatient in terms of delivering results, much more than multinational companies. They had invested in this company some robotics and automation equipment. And with that, they had promised certain improvement in productivity as a way of recovering the investment and then some, right? We call it the return on investment. The issue that they hadn't thought of before is this task of putting some boxes into a larger shipping box. It was done by 6 casuals. And of course, what procurement had done over the years was pretty much renegotiate with the cardboard packaging supplier to provide cheaper packaging. And what they have done, the provider of packaging, is they have basically trimmed as much as they could within the contractual agreement, and they were more or less providing the packaging material that was just bordering on the tolerances of what's accepted and what's not. But of course, when you got 6 people, casuals, folding flaps of the top and the bottom and putting a bit of sticky tape on the top and the bottom to hold it, they make it work, right? Whether those flaps are creased so that they fold easily or not, it really doesn't matter, because a little bit more elbow pressure, we can fold the flap. But now we've got rid of the 6 casuals. Here is the U-built German engineered state-of-the-art case packer. It's got sensors everywhere, but it's not as forgiving as the 6 casuals. If it is not creased at the right point, and if it can't fold the flap, it stops, saying there's an error. So now there's one operator where there is a jam up after jam up after jam up. There's more packets broken up and jammed, and the product inside on the floor. And all this person is doing is pretty much swearing and hitting the reset button and opening the door and clearing the jam up and pressing the green button again, and probably a few cases would go through and stop again. He certainly had a lot of issues to go home and kick the cat. But that's an area where we fail to identify in a process the human factor and how we make it work, and thinking that we can simply take out people and automate and get a better productivity rate. There are more things that could go wrong. Of course, putting equipment in is a valid strategy. I did study mechatronics engineering. That's all to do with automation and robotics. So I do come from the school of acknowledging that it is needed, but it's not a simple take people out, put equipment, and Bob's your uncle.
I've seen that happen in dentistry, John, because when I graduated, there was no computers. There were computers at university, some of my friends were doing computer science. I'm going, what's that? But there were computers. Even when I bought my office in 1987 and I refitted it in 1994, and part of the refit for the front desk was to have a return counter high enough that a cathode ray monitor could fit underneath the return without being obstructing vision and people. And I thought, who's going to want computers in 1994? Well, 2 years later, I'm getting computers for a dental software package. I hadn't even learnt computers, but I learnt my dental software package first, and in came computers. But one of the things I noticed in computers is that we have software engineers who work on programs who develop systems that have no relation to the real world, as you just pointed out with that U-Butte machine that couldn't sense where it was needed for a little bit of human extra effort. And it's the same in dentistry. Dentistry is an environment where nobody wants to be there as a customer. Nobody wakes up on a Monday morning and says, oh, I've got $500 over from the weekend. I'm going to go to the dentist and see what I can buy. Nobody says that. It's a grudge buy. People would rather drive on bald tires than go to the dentist. It's that bad. And so we've got to talk about making sure that we keep the human touch in the practice. People coming in and saying, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Moffat, just to let you know that Mrs. Smith is here for her 10 o'clock appointment and I've thanked her for coming in early. Whereas that's been replaced by a computer that just changes an image on a box on the appointment schedule. And then you're meant to look at the appointment schedule and say, oh, that's gone green. That means Mrs. Smith's here for her appointment. No human interaction, because when the patient who's in the chair hears that message of somebody delivering and they go, oh, they thanked her for coming in early, that means they want you to come in early. They're nice people because they thank you. They're nice people because they talk to each other. As soon as you take the human out of it, as you said about Sam, Sam knew the stuff. Nobody implied to Sam that they wanted his input. And so he just, like you said, he dropped his personality off at the door. He's very tolerant for 17 years with all that knowledge to still keep coming to work. Because I've seen plenty of times where people in big business, not dentistry, hit a glass ceiling because somebody above them doesn't want to hear their ideas. And so they either leave or they just go elsewhere. It's a frustration. And that happens in big business, happens in small business. So the people side of things is really, really important. So there's no truth to the rumor that the Queen's biscuit that Arnott's used to make, the reason that the shortbread stuck to the inside was because they used to lick it in the factory and it stuck to the biscuit, whereas when they stopped licking it, they fell apart. There's no truth to that, remember?
There is no truth to that. I can let you in a bit of trivia that you and perhaps your listeners may not know. Ginger nut is a biscuit that I think probably a lot of the oldies like it. They like to kind of dunk it in the tea and, it's a nice biscuit. Now, back in the day, when I'm talking about back in the day when Arnott's was owned by Mr. Arnott's, he actually grew the Arnott's biscuits by purchasing a lot of the biscuit businesses in different states. So, he went and bought the leading biscuit manufacturer in Queensland, and then that became part of Arnott's in Adelaide and so on and so forth. Now, back in the day, the ginger nut biscuit was made as a way of reusing a lot of leftover sweet dough, and then they put some of the ginger flavor and made it into a biscuit. So it was a good way of, I guess, reducing waste, the kind of the type of dough that you can reuse. So each business had their own ginger nut version. Now, coming to today, of course, now there's a proper recipe and you're not using it purely by what's left over. It's made to a recipe. But Arnott's have actually maintained the original characteristics of each of the biscuits in each state. So every time the retired couple, when they're in their caravan and when they're driving over across the borders, and when they have to buy a packet of ginger nut from a different state, Arnott's, I remember when I was working, we used to get quite a number of complaints about whether it is too hard or too soft because it's a different biscuit. So there you go. That's a bit of a bit of Arnott's trivia, and also the famous Tim Tam biscuit was named after one of the US Derby winning horse races. That's the name of the horse, Tim Tam. The story is one of the R&D managers who was there for the Kentucky Derby, I think, thought this is a fitting name for the biscuit that's getting newly developed. And so Tim Tam got its name from a winning horse.
Now, I introduced Tim Tam, or a way of consuming Tim Tams, to an American friend of mine. It's not a way that I would have eaten Tim Tams because I gave up drinking coffee, but the Tim Tam Slam, you know what the Tim Tam Slam is?
Absolutely. Just bite the two diagonal edges of a Tim Tam and then use it as a straw.
Yeah.
I haven't done it. Sorry. I've tried it once and ended up with a horribly melted Tim Tam that just basically fell into the coffee, and I just had to lick my fingers with the melted chocolate. But there are people who have practiced it and who love it, that they use it as a straw to basically suck the cream from the middle of the Tim Tam biscuit.
I learned it actually from I used to attend a masterclass in Chicago for dentists 4 times a year, and I was the only Australian going, and it was recorded. And the guy on the camera doing the recording was from Utah, and he had done a missionary posting in Australia, and so he'd learnt it in Australia. And so he said, "Can you bring me some Tim Tams every time you come over?" So I became a Tim Tam mule for him, filling my bag at the airport with packets of Tim Tams for him, and he would have them consumed by the first break. It was like he would gorge himself on Tim Tams. So all the better for Arnott sales. But I understand, as you said, about processes, and this is probably a true story, though it often sounds like an anecdote, and that is that when a company has a recipe, they're always looking at how can we improve our margins, and they change a flavour, and then all of a sudden what they end up with after a number of changes tastes nothing like what they originally started with. And they go, "Oh, how can that be?" And it's just, that's the Chinese whispers sort of change that happens. And so we've got to always remember that what was our core value in the recipe is also our core value in the business. And, you were talking about efficiencies and processes. One of my clients at the moment, I'm talking to them about handwritten Christmas cards being sent out. And one of the team members says, "Oh, can't we just get the Christmas card made up with, like, it looks like we've hand signed it?" I said, "Yeah, until one person," and they will all do it, they'll look at it and go, this is printed. And then they'll look at it and go, "Well, no, it's not." And there's your impact. And they said, "Well, what about putting stickers on the envelopes?" I said, "So it looks like a bill arriving." In fact, we used to send them out from our office in red envelopes, or green envelopes. So they actually look like Christmas cards. And so, then again, and sadly in our practice, and we send birthday cards. So sometimes people said, "You're the only person who sends me a birthday card or a Christmas card." And so that's the impact that you want to make. And so it takes a little bit longer, but I once timed myself. I sat down to sign them. 48 minutes, I signed 700 and something cards. I thought, I'm glad my name isn't Alexander. But certainly that was an effort. But again, it's processes, and what's the end result we're trying to achieve? And do we have to cut corners all the time? Sometimes, computerization can actually, getting back to that original point, that computerization can take away the personal touch, and we lose the purpose of what we're trying to achieve as well. But in terms of automation in a business like Kellogg's, I've seen it in breweries as well. Nobody handles the beer bottles and puts them in the six packs and then puts them in the carton. It's all done automatically, and that's got to be more efficient if you get your standards right for your cardboard and your standards right for the importance. And again, it goes down to business cards as well. You hand somebody a business card and it looks like it's been made out of tissue paper. It kind of says your business is flimsy. Whereas if it looks like it's been made out of good stock, people actually tap and go, "Oh, I like this," And so again, that's the point.
Unless you're in the business of making tissue paper, then that might be the point of difference.
Well, rumor has it there are some dentists who actually peel the tooth-fold tissues apart so they can get twice as many tissues out of the tissue.
Yeah. Few things, David, that just came to mind, and just want to share a couple of thoughts perhaps that could be relevant to your listeners in terms of something that might help them. But tell me if this helps or not. Firstly, just to go back into the ingredient thing. So, yes, so companies always look for ways of improving ingredients, and yes, they look for alternate ingredients, but they always try to maintain the nutritional information that's been declared on the packet. I have to say, when it comes to companies like Arnott's, happy and proud to say that they still use real butter. That's why the Scotch finger tastes like the Scotch finger. And I can also tell that it tastes very different coming out of the oven. It's like a cake and not a biscuit, because it's just oozing that butter. Then there is the point of improving equipment efficiency. So I think that's where, when it comes to productivity and efficiency and waste, companies know of, but they struggle because it's easier said than done. But then coming to the point of writing those hand notes, now here's the point that can well and truly help the dentist. Doug Conant was the CEO of Campbell's Soup. And if you just Google Doug Conant, one of the things he's known for is handwriting thank you cards every week for his employees around the world. But he had a system. So here comes the system. Doug Conant used to travel 2 hours each way back and forth in New Jersey, I think, where he lived back then. And so he had 2 hours. Of course, he was being driven. So sitting in the back of the car, he had 2 hours. And on one of the days, his PA actually collated all the good news stories from around the Campbell's Soup business. And he or she had obviously the number of thank you cards and the names and the tasks. So Doug basically sat in the back of the car, and on one of the trips, he basically wrote all the thank you cards for that week. He got known for the CEO who hand wrote thank you cards for employees, and there are a lot of case studies and Harvard Business Review articles that's been written about that, because what that does is lift the engagement factor. So coming back to the dentistry points, if that is a point of difference that you want to provide, the kind of the dentist practice that's got the human touch, yes, we look at the people in a practice as cost, but if we identify areas where they can add value, so perhaps your receptionist can give you a list for that week for the people that needs to be thanked, or the people who provided a service, or whatever, or the birthday, or whatever that might be, depending on the information you have on your CRM, then that shortcuts the time that you need to spend as the dentist on that task. So somebody else has optimized in terms of finding the information and providing it to you in a succinct way, so that you, the dentist, all you have to do is basically quickly write the notes and do your magic signature and hand it back to the receptionist. The problem is, if the dentist, the one who's bringing in the main income into the practice and the one who's probably got the highest hourly rate, if that person ends up doing the receptionist tasks, if that person ends up being the one, doing the credit card and collecting the money and taking the bookings and also ordering the stuff that you need to keep in the cupboard, that's when you start losing productivity and profitability. So it's about identifying your team, whether it is 2 or 3, and how can they support you to maximize your time to generate the most effective and efficient service, and therefore at the top line.
Yeah, absolutely correct there, Ishan. And so many dentists do a lot of stuff that they shouldn't be. I've seen dentists who walk out with their patient to the front desk, stand behind the receptionist and direct traffic in the appointment schedule while the receptionist sits there and says nothing. Now, the receptionist knows how to run an appointment book. That's what they're paid for. And it's not for the dentist to be delegating that, because nobody's getting up and going and drilling the next patient. So they're losing productivity, and they wonder at the end of the day why they're exhausted because they're doing 2 jobs, and why they're not making any money because they're basically, airplanes make most of their money when they're in the air and not when they're on the ground. And so the long hauls are always better than the short hauls because that's when you can charge the money. And it's the same in dentistry. If you're working on a patient, then everything else, nobody else in the practice can work on the patient.
Yeah, and hence going back to the airline, hence the focus on the turnaround time at the gate. Now, I know there's a case study with, I think it's Southwestern Airlines in the US. At one point, they benchmark turnarounding an airline with an F1 pit stop. Now, one would think they're totally crazy because a pit stop is measured in seconds and an airline is turned around, at least a minimum 30 minutes if it's a domestic flight. But it's the mindset. It's the mindset of what tasks can be shortened, can be improved so that we can turn around this plane so that, to your point, so that it makes money. Similarly, I wonder if you're running a dentist practice, what's the turnaround time between patients, right? And it's not so much the actual seconds and minutes. Do you call them patients? Who's the person who's sitting on the dentist chair? Patient?
Patients, clients, customers.
Clients, customers. Client sounds much better than a patient. So it's not so much the client time on the seat. I tend to look at even the energy level of the dentist, right? So if you finish with one client, and if you've got 5 minutes between the next client, how do you recharge your cup? Because I'm assuming as a dentist, you need to focus on the task that you're doing, right? It's so, and I can only assume that drains your mental focusing capacity and energy pretty rapidly. So unless you're consciously aware of how to recharge, that is also a waste because then you can't service or you can't provide the same level of service to the clients who come in at the end of the day to the same level that you provide at the beginning of the day. And if there is, an issue or a problem, then again, you're going to lose productivity and therefore profitability.
I think one of the things that a lot of dentists don't realize, Ishan, something that I developed because I was born with a disability. I'm left-handed. So a left-handed dentist has to work in a left-handed setup and a right-handed dentist has to work in a right-handed setup. So I had to work as productively as I could left-handed before I then surrendered half my office to a right-hander. And so it worked out for me that if I could work out of alternate chairs where I left one patient after I'd finished my dentistry with my dental assistant and walked straight into another room where there was another patient already in the chair with another dental assistant all set up, it was like I was continuing to fly.
Yeah.
I was not landing, waiting. And so I was able to maintain that same level of intensity mentally because I knew exactly what had to be done. Meanwhile, for the patient, it was actually a better experience because they weren't rushed in and rushed out. You know that feeling you get when you go to Movie World and you've got to get on the ride and then you've got to get off real quick and you get off real quick and you go, have I got everything? Did I leave anything behind? That feeling. The other feeling that patients get, which dentists and dental staff don't understand, is that same feeling of sitting in a seat that somebody's been sitting in for the last 2 hours and it's still warm. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about a dental room. I might be talking about a small room. And you go, somebody's been sitting here and it's kind of like, ooh. You like to think that your dental chair is kind of like your hotel room. It's clean, it's set up, it's made for you, and there's nobody been sleeping in that bed before you've got in there. You know somebody has, but you know there's been a time. Allowing patients to leave the chair comfortably with and somebody attending them while the dentist, who's the producer, moves to the other room was really, really important. And so I found that working out of alternate rooms, just as a restorer of teeth, I still had hygienists in other rooms again, but as a restorer of teeth, my production out of those 2 rooms was double per room what one dentist was working out of one room. And so I was 4 times more productive than other dentists. And all it was costing me was a little bit of extra rent for the space, 1 extra staff member per room. That's all, 1 extra staff member. And yet a lot of dentists don't think like that. They go, oh, I've got to put on another staff member. And so the service to the patient, remember, dentistry is a grudge buy. So what we would find is that patients would arrive early. They'd be in the chair ready. They would spend time talking to staff as they came in. And when they left, they weren't rushed out because they could take their time getting out of the treatment room. Then they could take their time at reception. And often they'd be there 20 minutes either side of their chair time, just visiting and socializing with the staff. And so it became an experience for them. And a lot of dentists don't look at it like that. And all it cost me was one extra chair.
We live in an experience world. What we pay for mainly is an experience, whether you're buying bread or whether you go to a restaurant or whether you're buying a car or a house. It's the experience. And, you talk about the best of the best, let's talk about Rolls Royce, metaphorically or literally. It's the experience. Yes, they make a good car, but then there could be equally good second tier cars, right? Some of the European cars. But what makes over and above the second tier cars is that experience. So yes, and that's a value add because you can probably charge a premium so that you're basically bringing in extra income for that extra service for the people making the clients feel better, for giving them extra time in their own time to get out of the seat and walk out, and the contact time with that extra staff member that you have. So they may not be common ways or the usual thinking, because these are the paradigm shifts. And in my first book, I was talking about these paradigm shifts that businesses need to have before they can optimize or start to think about optimizing productivity and profitability. Because if you think about how businesses start, typically there is if you think about the smaller businesses, the story goes usually like, me and dad started this business in the garage, 40 years ago. And, it was a great success story. And then we moved into an industrial unit, with about half a dozen people. And then we started growing the business. And then there's an inflection point. There's a point and that started to take off. And here we are in a business with now 60, 70 people. And we're doing we're doing really well. But the problem is the top line continues to grow. The working hours of the son and dad continues to grow. The complexity within the business is starting to grow. And the profitability is actually diminishing from a percentage perspective. So when I go into these businesses, the first thing I look around and I can see the telltale signs. It's like a scaled up garage that they're running. So my usual metaphorical answer is, look, you've graduated from primary school to high school. It's time to wear long pants now. You can't wear short pants. And we need to start thinking like the big multinational businesses. They play a different game. You can't simply add more volume by adding more warehouses and more raw material and more packaging material and finished goods and just adding more people. It's not a linear solution. So similarly, exactly as you just said, David, when you're trying to grow the practice or grow the profitability, you've got to sometimes think about outside the box and sometimes think of providing better services because that also helps you to provide a differentiation from other dentist practices and have more connection points, or the dentist who writes thank you cards and birthday cards. But overall, you're providing a better service that the client feels valued and is happier to turn up. So yeah, it's about those paradigm shifts we need to think about and look at what we can do differently.
We're heading off into that Michael Gerber E-Myth phase of looking at businesses as whether you've grown just into you've gone into your own business, but you've just created a bigger job for yourself. I think one of the best examples to tie this back, Ishan, is to look at the fast food outlets. McDonald's burgers aren't the tastiest burgers in the world, but they're a consistent product that is delivered worldwide where people have an expectation, this is what I'm going to get. It's going to be okay. It's going to do the job. It's going to fill my hunger, and I'm going to be served well, and I'm going to be served quickly. But when we look at what McDonald's actually does, they have the ability to take 13-year-old children and train them to speak the McDonald's way and to cook the McDonald's way and produce the McDonald's product. In dentistry, and you've probably seen it in other businesses, there's always people who think they've got a better way. But, you can't go to the Four Seasons and work there saying, well, I've worked at the Hyatt. They have their own playbook, and you've got to stick to those playbooks. And it's developing those playbooks. Dental practices rarely have a playbook, and that's the issue. And so the phone is answered differently. We listen to phone calls in our coaching. And we were talking to a practice where they had 3 different receptionists who answered the phone in 3 different ways. And my wife said, "How's that working for you?" She goes, "Well, I guess it's not." And then the next question my wife said, "Well, tell me about your processes in the back of the office, in the back of the practice." They said, "We haven't got anything down there either." And so it's just make stuff up as we go along, the Massawa principle. And that's not really the way to run a business. That's the way to basically run a charity where you're charitable to your customers, you're charitable to your staff, and in the end, you're relying that when you retire, you're relying that there will still be a pension for you because you haven't put enough money away because you haven't been profitable in your business. And that's the tragedy of a lot of businesses. You see it, you will probably see it in yours. Businesses going from small to big. And it's not just to go from small to big. We've got to go from good to great, haven't we? That's the answer.
Absolutely. Love Jim Collins, one of my favorite authors, who wrote that book titled Good to Great. Want to share a couple of things because you're right on the money there, David. We call these standards when it comes in the manufacturing world, because what these standards provide is ability to repeat and scale, and also to understand that that is the expectation. So if there is a target of making 100 widgets an hour, then that is the standard. So having standards in place, it makes it easier to spot when we can't maintain standards. We call those problems, or when we can maintain standards. So that means we are able to repeat and scale the business. So firstly, identifying the right standards, whether it is manufacturing or whether it is in the dentistry. How long should it take to do a certain types of cavity filling? How long should it take to do a simple cleaning up task? Because what that does is it allows you to then optimize your calendar, not necessarily in half-hour blocks, because that's what Microsoft Outlook did. So now everything is a half an hour block. Or do you say, depending on the type of work the client is coming in, then you allocate. If it needs 40 minutes, then you should have a system that allows you to book 40 minutes. So identifying the standards is number one. The other thing is what manufacturing businesses are really good at is daily reviews. So pulse checks. So every day they have a quick huddle with all the key people to review what happened yesterday. Did we hit our targets, or were we able to maintain our standards? And if not, if there are some areas, maybe the Tim Tam line was maintained the standards, but maybe the shapes line didn't. So then there would be a quick discussion on what went wrong and what we need to do differently. And more importantly, are we at risk today? Because yesterday's gone, but today's yet to come. So similarly, I wonder whether if we had a quick huddle meeting at the beginning of the day between the dentist and the assistant and maybe perhaps the receptionist, go like, okay, how did we go yesterday? And what are we in for today? What are the critical points? Who are the key clients, et cetera, et cetera. That preparation allows you to get the best of the team because it is a team game we're playing. The third aspect is kind of on a weekly or monthly basis, kind of having a longer discussion on what do we need to improve on. Now, in manufacturing, we have a lot of data points where we can look at what are the products that are more profitable, what are the shifts that are perhaps not so efficient, so on and so forth. But similarly, I wonder what the conversation might look like if the dentist, the receptionist, and the assistant took a couple of hours every month to sit back and have a cup of tea and a big biscuit and have a conversation around what are the common themes that we are seeing in terms of difficulties, constraints, going home and kicking the cat, running out of material. All those highlight issues of a bigger problem underneath. So if you're constantly running out of a certain ingredient or a product or something that you need in your practice, that highlights either your purchasing time is not frequent enough, or you're not buying in bulk, or you're wasting. You're simply using too much of that material than you're meant to. But it highlights those points that then tells you that's where you're leaking a lot of your profitability. So having standards allows you to have a daily review, but more importantly, a pulse check on a monthly basis to identify where to sharpen and to improve the practice as well.
Ishan, That's a great idea there, and it's a great way to sadly point out to the dentists watching this program that most dental practices don't have daily huddles. Even less dental practices have weekly reviews. And sadly, most dental practices, nearly every dental practice, doesn't do any customer service training with their team, as well as let alone skills and process training, like answering the phone. They answer the phone on live bullets. They don't even practice with each other. It's crazy the amount of wastage because of not having basic systems and processes. One of the things that I've gotten from talking to you is that it's always a matter of reviewing your processes and working out where something's gone wrong, and then just double checking that that's not the sign that really there may be something back along the line that is really causing that problem as well. So yeah, it's not that the machine's breaking down; it's that the machine's not being serviced properly, and so that's why it breaks down. Again, we're cutting corners on those sort of things. So there's a lot to unpack. I think you've done a great job in showing the comparison with all businesses. Dentistry is a business. If you don't treat it like a business, you are running a charity, and that's not what you've been put on this earth for. You've been put on this earth to create employment for people, but also to create profit and spend that profit in your community and invest and have that profit used and pay your taxes as well. Really, really important. So a lot of dentists don't think of that. They say, oh, I'm a clinician. Well, if you're a clinician, just go and work for the government and help the people who can't afford the dentistry. That's my thought. I'd love to talk to you again. We've run out of time. Ishan, what's the best way for anybody watching or listening to this podcast to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I've got a complicated name, so trying to give my name and my web address is not going to work. But instead, what I'll do is I'll share you the web address of my latest book, Unlock. So if you go to unlockbook.com.au, I'm sure David will put that in the show notes. So unlockbook.com.au. That'll take you straight to the book website. And from there, you can just basically go to the About page or the Home page and get all the information to get in touch with me, or download the free PDF about the book, or the Chaos to Excellence, the white paper that I've got on the home page. So there's a lot of free material for you to look at on improving your businesses, improving productivity, improving the engagement of your team, and ultimately improving the profitability of your practice.
Ishan, it's been great talking to you. You probably thought that we weren't going to have much to talk about, but we've gone for a full hour. So appreciate your time and look forward to catching up with you at a PSA event in the near future. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
David, yes, thank you so much. Yes, I did worry about it, thinking, what am I going to talk about? So, no, it's been a delight talking to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate